This bloke knows all about you.
Christopher Wylie.
Christopher Wylie.
Christopher Wylie.
A Canadian data scientist with a passion for predicting how people vote, Wylie stumbled upon a magic formula, a 5-factor personality test that told him everything he needed to know about a person's
openness,
conscientiousness,
extroversion, agreeableness,
neuroticism.
Taking this to his role as Director of Research at a company called Cambridge Analytica, Wylie, backed by right-wing poster boys Steve Bannon and billionaire Robert Mercer, played a huge part in changing the world.
The British people have voted to leave the European Union.
Donald Trump will be the 45th President of the United States.
Cambridge Analytica obtained data collected from a 5-factor personality quiz called This Is Your Digital Life, a quiz hosted on Facebook that had the ability to scrape the details of the person doing the quiz and all their friends. Complete profiles, likes, interests, names, ages, locations, status updates, even private messages.
You would have no idea that I've just pulled all of your data.
The data was then weaponised, used to target people that it identified whose vote could be swayed using targeted ads and disinformation via social media.
You're playing with the psychology of an entire nation in the context of the democratic process.
In 2016, it helped the Leave Party win the Brexit vote.
Dare to dream!
And helped Donald Trump win the US presidency.
A full-service propaganda machine. I do feel responsible for it.
Wylie's whistleblowing brought to light the 87 million profiles, comprising of some 300,000 Australians, that Cambridge Analytica had in their database. And it led to the biggest international data crime investigation in history, resulting in fines for Facebook and bankruptcy for CA.
It was a grossly unethical experiment.
But with another US election looming in 2020 and political unrest around the world, is the world ripe for more secret psychological warfare? The answer will mess with your mind. Well, Christopher Wylie explains all of this and more in jaw-dropping detail in his new book, which I'm holding up here. The title, I might just give a miss for the moment. You might be able to use your powers of deduction to figure out what that is. I did, however, catch up with him last night. Christopher, thank you very much for joining us. I want to begin with something you said in your book that was fascinating. You say that after Trump won the election in 2016, you got a text message from a Democratic friend of yours who said, quote, "This may have been just a game to you, but we are the ones who have to live with it." How did you respond?
Obviously, for me, it was quite eye-opening to see the product of work that I'd done at a company originally for counter-extremism to then be inverted and used to radicalize people. So I was obviously quite concerned. It was only after the election happened that I think people really woke up to the power of what you can do with data.
Would it be fair to say that you were part of a team that was building a personality quiz or a personality app that existed really for the purposes of getting people's data so that they could be manipulated?
Yes, that's what Cambridge Analytica did. It harvested data using Facebook applications in order to identify people who would be more prone to conspiratorial thinking or paranoid ideation in order to target them with information that would accelerate those traits.
Give us a sense of how it works then. Like, how many likes do you need to be able to track in someone's social media use before you know a lot about them?
One of the things that people sort of forget is that when, you go and you click a like on Facebook or you post about something or you share something on Instagram, you are revealing pieces of information about yourself that can be put together like a puzzle. And once an algorithm has enough pieces of information about you, between 200 and 300 likes for a person, they are able to anticipate, within a range of accuracy, certain behaviors that you may have, likely behaviors in the future. You're able to build AI that can better anticipate how people will behave than that person's spouse, their partner, their close friends. And so I think that people really need to understand, like, when you go onto Facebook and you like all of these things and you post about these things, right? You're not just sharing that with your friends, you're sharing that with an algorithm. And you're sharing that with an algorithm whose job it is to take that information, create a profile about you, and then try to figure out what are the things to show you that will influence your behavior. Cambridge Analytica took that sort of model and specifically looked for people who at the onset were more prone to conspiratorial thinking or paranoid ideation, with the view that these are the people that Steve Bannon would be able to use in order to spark an insurgency in the United States.
It's fairly extreme, isn't it? I mean, that's sort of political manipulation. Did Did you ruin democracy?
Well, I wouldn't say that I personally ruined democracy. I mean, my role originally was working on counter-extremism research. That company was then acquired by an alt-right billionaire. Steve Bannon was put in charge. And after that point, a lot of the research that we were originally doing to identify men who would be more prone to, for example, joining ISIS, that kind of profiling was then used to identify people in the alt-right. When I saw what was happening, I left.
It sounds like, one way or another, this weapon got built. And Cambridge Analytica is no more. But does the weapon still exist? Can we see this sort of data out there somewhere being used to manipulate people and destroy elections in future?
My real concern is, what happens if, North Korea decides to become the next Cambridge Analytica? What happens if Iran decides to become the next Cambridge Analytica, or China, or whomever? And until we actually start putting rules in place to demand accountability from platforms like Facebook to do their job and protect the democracies of the countries that allow them to make money, we will remain vulnerable to the kinds of things that Cambridge Analytica deployed.
Well, Facebook have recently announced that they won't be including any fact-checking on their platform in the lead up to upcoming elections, like the 2020 election in the United States. Do you see a repeat of 2016 potentially happening?
A lot of the things that Cambridge Analytica was able to accomplish are still possible today. And they're still possible today, whether it's for a private company or whether it's for a nation state. And my real concern is that authorities in the United States or in Britain or around the world are not taking seriously the real threat that a subset of the population during an election could be targeted with disinformation or propaganda, and that will impact the results of an election. Something that's important for people to think about is, a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm not vulnerable to disinformation, I'm not vulnerable to any of this sort of targeted marketing. Facebook would not be a profitable company if you weren't, first of all. But secondly, you should also be concerned about, your neighbor or the person down the street or the person in your office or your grandparents, because even if you, don't fall victim to, clicking on disinformation and believing something that's not true, there will be people around you who do. And those people vote, those people make decisions. Just because you don't necessarily see it doesn't mean that it won't affect you. Hostile propaganda can affect you too.
So looking back, do you have any regrets?
Yeah, I do. In that moment, when you're typing on a computer, it doesn't feel like you're doing anything to people. But those things can have consequences, and sometimes those things can have serious consequences on people. And, my biggest regret is that at the very beginning, I did not think about how could the things that I'm working on be misused, and they were.
Christopher, it's a really, really important issue, one of the defining issues of our times. Thank you very much for speaking to us, and all the best with the book.
Cheers, thank you.